Amitofo, we start off with a vow and the recitation of the four great vows. Vow, the four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. I was thinking that I was going to give kind of like a very simple class, but I think that it's probably better that we just continue on from where we were at, and I'll try to make it as simple as possible. I've been receiving a lot of requests to ask about contemplation and what contemplation is. So I was studying about contemplation and what it means, and it just depends on who you ask what contemplation is. A lot of times, contemplation is more along the lines of a deep cogitation, a deep thinking, an isolation on a particular subject where one looks into with a deep attention to it. But yet there's still cogitation, there's still that one that is contemplating. When I refer to contemplation, it is not in this way. It goes back way beyond Bodhidharma, but we can start there at least with the first patriarch and his wall gazing. And in wall gazing, essentially, it was as if he was in a cave and he was just gazing at the cave wall. What is there to see? There's just simply the cave wall, but the mind is still active. It is still there. And the only thing that it's devoid of is clinging to any kind of an appearance within mind. When we look at the sutras and we see that in the Wisdom Sutras, they are very careful about talking about appearances. There is a great subtlety there, which Nagarjuna really kind of balanced that line and he walked it very carefully. The thing is if we go to one side, it's nihilistic, nothing is there. The appearances don't exist, everything is there, and we believe that that's an emptiness of nothing. But if we go on the other side and say, oh, well, this exists, or this life or being exists, then it goes towards some form of an eternalism. And even eternalism either of our own soul or some being, supreme being, that's there. But that isn't really Buddhism. Although a lot of people who practice devotionally and hold the Buddha up to a very high level. And that in this kind of a practice, there is a duality there. And I was listening to Professor Pan the other evening, and he was talking about Pure Land Buddhism, and it was very, very interesting in what he was saying and how they use visualization in their practice. But the word that means visualization also means contemplation. And so in the early stages, before Tibetan Buddhism had come on the scene, the Pure Land school was using these kinds of visualizations of imagining the Buddhas, imagining Amitabha, imagining certain things, and creating this kind of a bodhisattva structure there. And they were using this visualization, but But the higher level, you could say, is a contemplation on the Buddha or mind. And this is the entry point that one can go and put aside the idea of an ego. Nevertheless, there is a consciousness there, but not a consciousness that pertains to a particular person. In this stage where we have this consciousness, we don't even really refer to it as a consciousness. Every time I read this in the sutras, they don't talk about it as a consciousness. They talk about it as an awareness. And if you hear me talking or whatever I've written, I don't regularly refer to this as a consciousness. And the reason that I don't do that is that people will have the impression that there is an individual consciousness. Now, appearance-wise, it appears that we all have our own individual consciousness, but it isn't really that way. The Dharmata Vibhaga Sutra refers to this kind of a consciousness and says we have this unique consciousness, unique karma as well, that pertains to our life experiences in regards to whether it was this life or other lifetimes. And we have a collective consciousness with all of those around us. So, for instance, here in this particular lecture, there's a collective consciousness that's here, that's listening. And each of you are, in accordance with your ability and your attention, your understanding, perceive what I'm saying a little bit differently, but yet it's still collective that's there. These are none of these are, let's say, a true consciousness. All of these represent an appearance, the appearances of the collective karma of how we perceive something and what we're doing, and the individual as to what's going on. Because even if you were mind strayed for the moment, it would not be me going, Ron Chen, what are you talking about? What are you thinking about? You should be listening. It isn't in this way. Sometimes the speaker can be aware of the attention span of parties, but the thing is that all of these things are happening simultaneously within mind, but we don't see these things either as temporal or spatial. We see them as occurring in mind. When I say we see them, is the awareness of mind that's there, this Buddha mind awareness that perceives not through the five skandha, but through its own knowing or gnosis. I've been talking about this for quite a long time now, the ruzi, which is the knowing aspect of mind. We cannot really call it a consciousness per se, although in the Abhidharma they refer to this as a bhavanga consciousness, which is this general consciousness that exists before words and concepts arising. I suppose in some ways the Yogacara school could refer to it as the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness or storehouse of keeping everything that has happened, will happen, or is happening all in one place. All of this is mind. When we talk about contemplation, we're not talking about some exalted or high level thinking or utilizing the sutras in a way to produce some high level understanding. Of course, those things will facilitate the practice. But if they, in and of themselves, was the path, then you would find that there would be so many enlightened scholars that you clearly could see that that was the way. But it isn't in this way. It isn't just simply the knowing of knowledge, of worldly knowledge, the worldly knowledge of the sutras and the lectures, the words of the Buddha. All of these things still are part of samsara. It is this contemplation, then, that serves as a bridge to mind. And it's kind of funny because when we say it serves as a bridge to mind, it presupposes that you are here and mind is here, and you merge in this way, that you're there. But it isn't in this way. It's as if mind is this way and it's infinite, and there's this tiny little dot there that all of a sudden is absorbed by mind. We talk about self-absorption, and this absorption is one that is there. When we talk about the four great vows, there's another version of it, which is, I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings of self-nature. Of self-nature. It is saying, I'm vowing to deliver these sentient beings, even though they already are part of the Buddha mind. This is something that's difficult for us to understand, and to try to understand what contemplation is. If we try to bring the phenomenal aspect of us, this egocentrism, self-love, ego, and try to pull it through to it is what the ancients say is encountering a steel wall, a giant steel wall that you cannot penetrate through. No matter how much you do it, you hit and you hit and you hit, and you can't make it through. Because when you're studying, the problem is that you can't let go of the self. And you want to bring the self with you. Otherwise, how can you prove to people that you're enlightened? What did it feel like? I don't know. What do you mean you don't? Are you enlightened or not enlightened? I'm enlightened. What did it feel like? I don't know. I wasn't there. Well, if you weren't there, then you probably weren't enlightened. And this is the mind thoughts that are going through your head. You want to come back with something to show that you're enlightened. The fastest progress I ever made in the practice was when I decided to put down any notion of attainment. I know we always talk about it, there's nothing to throw out, nothing to pick up. But still, the ego has that urge when it sits, and this, you sit with this idea. You sit there and go, oh, it's coming now. It's coming now. And you can feel it. You're getting closer to it. Thoughts are dropping off. And you're going, wow, this is really great. And it was only gas. And you go, well, what good was that? I don't understand this. Because you cannot. You're banging at the steel wall that you, by your own device, have created, that cannot go through. Wouldn't it be a bit scary if, when you woke up and you were being chased by some horrible demon that's chasing you in your dream, been chasing you the whole night, right? And then you wake up, I'm awake. Whew. It was only a dream. And then you look in your covers and there's the demon chasing you. That would really scare you, right? It would come right out. and the chase would begin again now. It doesn't work that way, though, you see, because that demon is self-created of self-nature, of of ignorance. And when you wake up, by nature of it, that being a dream, it goes away. Likewise, imagine if in this lifetime you sat sincerely contemplating the method, using mind to look into mind. There's no longer a steel wall. The idea of the self and its attainments and its failures and its pain and its suffering fall away completely. All that's left is mind contemplating mind, looking into mind. Now, it is at this point where the ego, being devious and an interest in self-preservation, self of the ego preservation, will begin to conjure up various experiences that you can take back with you and show people the proof that you have accomplished or understood or penetrated. We have lost track in that moment of where ego was. Where's ego? Did you see him? No, I didn't see him. Did you ask ego? Ego, did you see ego? Ego says, I don't know. He's gone. I think he left already. He left before 10. So you've been without ego for at least 5 minutes. Oh. Ego, are you there? No. And you get tricked or deceived by ego into thinking that you are now sitting without the ego. But it is very, very subtle. It can be there up until the last moment. At the very last moment, when there's no idea of your name or anything or any appearances, it's still there. We cannot let it at that moment sneak back through. So our practice in practicing right view is that we have to become adept at seeing the arising of the ego. Now, when we are sitting, cogitating the method, thinking about the method, thinking about holding on to the method, our mind is obstructed. It's not clear. It is very easy to lose track of the ego because the ego plays this shell game on you and says, look right here. You pull the shell. It's not there. Right here. It's not there. No matter what shell you pick up, the ego's not there. So you said, there is no ego anymore. Well, then who said that? It isn't in this way. So it is this perseverance that we do that requires us to be observant. In this contemplation, it is not contemplating in a dark cave where we do not see anything. It's quite to the contrary. One can feel each individual hair as the air passes over them. It is precise, clear. It is aware of the environment, aware of the method. It does not cling to things that are unnecessary. What time is it? When is the timer going to uh, cling the bell? It, those things have no substance or value at that moment. Simply letting the mind rest. So contemplation is allowing the mind to rest. Early on in my practice, I always use this as an analogy, and it still serves its purpose. Um, have you ever seen the Chinese acrobats that have the little frisbee like things and a long stick, and they're spinning them? You know, they start with one and they end up 20 of them, 10 in each hand, and they're spinning them and spinning them and spinning them. And so they're quite skillful in keeping them all going. If they're to stop spinning or moving their hands, all of those plates will lose their inertia and just fall over on their own accord. That's natural. Likewise, it's natural if one is engaged in contemplation, and even that doesn't even sound right to me. One is engaged in contemplation. If the mind is contemplating, then it's no longer giving inertia to the spinning plates, the ego. And the ego keeps the whole world spinning, keeps everything there. That's why I said to Shifu, it is like putting a spoke in a bike wheel. It all stops and flops over. And that's when he reminded me, but it only flops over and stops for you. So we understand that the world has its own inertia because there's so many people spinning those plates. But you see different, and it's not even a you, it is just all of a sudden mind sees ego. For the first time, mind really sees ego. We see the traces of ego everywhere, you know. Who took the last donut in the box? Not me, you know. And later on, we said that was my ego. I shouldn't have taken that last donut in the box. So we can see it in some of our actions. But when we talk about subtle wisdom of being able to practice in the proper way, we no longer are looking for these gross examples of ego that are there. We have stopped spinning the plates, but realized that everything goes on. And we see now the purpose of our life in accordance with our vows. And we understand better how to practice life. We understand better what we're going to do. What can we accomplish? And if we, let's say, feel like we're not worthy of such lofty goals, at least we don't make the place worse. And then we begin to practice in a way that enables others to practice. We bring people to the practice. Probably one of the greatest things that we can do is bring people to the practice. And again, it's not proselytizing, it's not knocking on doors and say, Buddha loves you. It is demonstrating in the present moment what a pure mind can do. So we take this contemplation off the cushion. And when we take it off the cushion, we are contemplating via the five senses. It's not just simply receiving information. Our human awareness wave band is about like that. Not much. We're aware. What are we aware of mostly is temperature, loudness, if it's too quiet, too light, brightness, those kinds of things, foul smells, perhaps, uncomfortable situation, uncomfortable clothing, whatever it is. But our wave band is as narrow as our comfort zone in terms of environmentally. But mind is capable of so much more. We cannot see that because the we gets in the way. When you're sitting there and you're having to look around, the ego that's before you, you can't see. Even though the ego is formless, signless, it nevertheless obscures that which is being received by the senses. It blurs them. Just like my background here is blurred, it blurs in this way, but most of the time it's blurred in the reverse way. And it doesn't allow us to see things carefully. Not only that, but the appearances of things pass by too quickly. It's difficult for you to understand what is happening. This, in some ways, I used when I was an attorney for my benefit or my client's benefit, but not in a manipulative way or deceived way, but simply to know far ahead where everything should go to and planning everything that's there based on the time that's there, the people that are there, all sorts of different factors that are there, monetary factors, time factors, hunger factors, all these different things in order to resolve a case or to move your case forward if you were in court. But you arrive there way before the other persons that are involved in that case there. Sometimes the judge might be there with you and sees what you're up to. Not that you're deceiving, it's just that your mind is working faster than everybody else's because it's not impaired, it's not obstructed. And so it can see the things there and it's just waiting for the events to catch up to where you are directing them to want to settle or to convince or to show the judge something about the case that's important. Not to deceive, but to put forth the best possibility of either winning a case if you went to trial or to settle a case even more so, better. And everything in this world is this way. But if you're trying to think about it, it won't work that way. If you contemplate it and you contemplate, your mind is capable of receiving so much information where, let's say, in a regular person's life, they may receive 1% of the information. But imagine if you were able to receive 20% of the information or 50%. I don't think you could receive 100% unless there's a complete enlightenment. But that is quite a bit of information. And what it does is it begins to have the appearance of this world to move in slow motion, simply because since there's no obstructions in the mind, there's no confusions. There being no confusions, the information comes in at an incredibly fast rate. The equivalent in technological or the quantum computers, which are able to process information not linearly, but simultaneously stacked up problem solving simultaneously. And imagine if you had 1,000 scenarios that the mind is producing and running through the eventuality of it. And then from those 1,000, pick the best one. Your life would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? Mind is like that, but it's infinite processing. We don't understand that. It's not conceivable. And I'm using this as a poor example of using technology to try to give you an idea of what contemplation is. Contemplation is a direct plug-in, mind to mind. So the information in mind is there. If we stop and say, well, wait a second, you mean if I do this one, I win, boom, everything slows down again because there's the self. It isn't in this way. There's no self in contemplation, only self-nature. The self-nature is everything, and it has access to everything. And this is how we process information. It's very incredible, but it is possible to do that. What I'm doing with you is telling you about contemplation rather than just say, okay, we're going to contemplate the four mindfulness or contemplate this or that. That's still worldly cogitation. It's not bad. It's good. It's a good practice. And if you practice sincerely, it can become contemplation if one can penetrate through. But when we are contemplating, it's not like the Rodin statue of the thinker sitting there and going, now how am I going to get another donut or whatever it is that are contemplating. I just happen to think that's what Rodin was thinking at the time, but he could have used to put on a few pounds. But in any case, the thing is, it isn't in that way. Contemplation is the knowing aspect of mind interfacing with the Dharmakaya and clicking in. Sometimes they call it samadhi. And samadhi can be this way. Thing about Buddhist is if one samadhi is good, then you got to name 10 samadhis or 6 samadhis or 5 samadhis. And you go, well, which one is the good one? Or which one is that? And sometimes we make too many lists. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but Buddhists are great in making lists. They're great bloggers or influencers because they can always come up with something to talk about the 10 this, the 10 best of the best of the best, or whatever. But in this samadhi, it's not a class of samadhi. It's the samadhi of the contemplation of mind, direct connection. There is nothing apart from that. It is the fusion of the knowing mind. We start apart with a gnosis, a beginning gnosis in the knowing aspect of the mind. And in that knowing aspect of the mind, this gnosis that is putting this together, it begins to draw closer and closer to the Dharmakaya. No longer is the Dharmakaya something like out in the distance, that you're looking at and saying, this is the Buddha mind over there. Where's the Buddha? The Buddha's over there. It isn't in this way. There's no direction, no inside, outside, up, down. There is no west. Although we refer to it as the Western Pure Land. What if you were on the other side? I guess it would be the Western Pure Land if you're on the other side of it. But wouldn't it be the Eastern one? Unless you say the Western one, because it takes you all the way to go around to get there. But how could you possibly get there? So directions are irrelevant in mind. Conceptual thinking is irrelevant in mind. These are just imaginings that are happening within mind. So we release the mind from holding on to these things. It's as if you were in a boat in the ocean and ran into a bed of kelp. And as you're going through the bed of kelp, it slows your boat down. It drags you. It drags you along, slows you down because of that. And that's the same thing as the mind going through a dream state. The dream state obscures the mind. It then begins to commandeer the mind to believe that this dream state is real. And to dream of becoming a Buddha is a dream. It should not be that way. It is why the Mahayanas were insistent on this in terms of saying just this mind is the Buddha. At the time when the Pure Land practice was so prevalent in China in the very early years that of the influence of Indo-Buddhism in China, there was mostly Pure Land practitioners, except for a very small part of China. Most were Pure Land. Again, Pure Land, but if you ever get a chance to listen to Professor Pond, you'll find it's much more sophisticated than what we think of what Pure Land is. But nevertheless, it was something that was also still influenced a lot by the Abhidharma and everything is real, and holding on to this ideal of going somewhere to practice to become a Buddha. Mahayana came in and says, just this mind is the Buddha mind. And one of the things that hit me once in terms of realization that I had was the ordinary and mundaneness of the mind. We always want to see something like child radiance who could float up into the sky, or something like Willem McCritty expanding his room and to do things in there to accommodate thousands of people. But the mind is very ordinary and mundane. When we start to make it fantastic, it is our imaginings that enable that to happen, and we do not have the wisdom to be able to discern what is an imagining and what is the mind. The Shurangama Sutra, the 8th volume, talks about this and says that one can acquire certain intuitive skills, some great skills, to be able to hear voices from a distance, or to see the past or see the future, or to do fantastical things. And it says all of these things are good indicators of your progress in the practice, but one should put them down. In other words, we don't pay any attention to them. We don't think of ourselves or measure ourselves from the acquisition of any intuitive powers. It isn't in this way. When one simply gives up, just take a rest, then on its own, mind sees there's now an apparent vacuum there that it begins to fill up with mind. Because what was there before was the clinging to the self or the ego, to a soul, to permanence of these things. And when those things recede by virtue of one's practice and one's study, then mind can easily come. So it draws in that way and fills in those gaps that are there to see. And the ordinariness and the mundaneness is just that we are swimming in mind all the time. It is because we are reaching for things and utilizing the cogitation to try to grasp something that prevents us from truly contemplating. When we can contemplate correctly, the mind is still. And it is functional, perfectly functional. In my daily life, I still make a lot of mistakes, but I don't make as many mistakes as I did when I was younger in my life. Oh, how I wish I could just kind of rewind the the reel and undo some of the things that I did when I was younger. We develop a shame and repentance practice so that we see what we've done so that we can adjust our practice, not to succumb to ego and ego's desires for revenge or for desires for desire, all of those things. But we begin to see things clear as we practice. So this contemplation, when you sit and I tell you to just contemplate the method, you place the mind on the method, but you don't you you don't say I am placing the mind on the method. It is simply a fusion, just like we use direct contemplation and fusing with an object in our mind, whether it's a flower, a stone, tree bark, whatever. This little tiny practice just enables us to sense what contemplation is without thought. If you're there counting the amount of flower petals or wondering if this color is, a shocking pink or a fuchsia color, then you're doing it all wrong. But if there's simply a gnosis, a direct connection with this object and mind, that object will be absorbed by mind. It will be there in accordance with cause and conditions. For a short period of time, it will be imprinted in the mind. Nothing fantastical about that. It's just that we begin to understand how this works, how we see things. And there was let me see if I have there was a term is it's spelled EIDETIC, which is I guess eidectic. How many of you know what that word is? Senta does. This is like a philosophy type word, but this word, and this was coming out of what Professor Pong was lecturing on, was that eidectic visualization, and he was saying that is something that remains in mind after contemplation. And that's what we want to do with this visualization. If we're visualizing the method, that's contemplation, but there's no thought there. So the stronger the fusion there is, it remains in the mind. And so when we contemplate, we're not really contemplating any particular thing unless we're in meditation, but all of it begins to fuse together. All of mind, because I use a different exercise rather than direct contemplation, which is kind of a omni visualization. of seeing everything simultaneously. And I think that this particular practice, when you're outside, is very incredible practice because it enables you to be aware of everything simultaneously. So this is a state of equanimity and or a state of equipoise. And when we're in a state of equipoise, everything is visualized, everything is you're aware of. The only difference is that everything is equally weighted. We see it so that there's no obstructions, because once one thing occupies the center of the mind, it begins to slow everything down, like the kelp dragging the bow and slowing the bow of a boat down. It will be that way. If we can maintain this state of equipoise in spite of encountering all of these appearances, the mind works perfectly. It's fused perfectly. It's oriented in a manner in which to produce the best results from body, speech, and mind. This is contemplation as I refer to it. Again, it's not a contemplation of a particular list of Buddhist principles. This is wall gazing, what Dhammo had presented early on. But in this way, as we begin to practice, then we understand what this contemplation is. When we sit to meditate, we just simply rest the mind. This is a very key point, that in everything that we do, we should rest. We can't keep drawing up things that happened in the past or what will happen or whatever. All of those things tire us out and drag us down. But if we can let go of those things, we understand, nevertheless, we are still able to function. But the difference is that we function without discrimination. We function without differentiation. And this is very important. When we start differentiating things, me, my problem, your problem, my problem with you having a problem, then you mess everything up. If you discriminate and say, my pain is more important than your pain, or my discomfort is more, or whatever, then it's that way. I have a family member that, whatever you would say, um, let's say, I broke my leg, and that person would say, well, that's nothing. I broke both my legs, and always thinking about, not, instead of saying, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I feel bad. Are you doing better or whatever? They just want to talk about their own situation. So it isn't in this way. If you break your leg, I will feel it. I will know it. I don't have to equate it to the time I stubbed my toe or whatever. That's not important. What's important is to make sure that you're okay. And we have this kind of compassion. We don't have the thing where they go, oh, they cut off my leg, and you're there filing your nails going, well, everything's impermanent. That's not compassion. That doesn't do us anything. When people are down, you want to be there. You want to support them. You want to let them know that you care about them, unconditionally, that you care about them. It doesn't matter who they are, but you want to let them know that you support them, that you help them, that you will be there. This is so important for us to do that. It gets rid of the self. It develops a bond between you and other people in this way. It's part of our practice. Lately, I've been doing a practice which is kind of interesting, which is, I would say, more contemplation than recitation. So in the end of the night, I do a lot of recitation, a lot. And my recitation has been changing over the past few months. And now I'm doing a recitation. And as I'm doing the recitation, where you'd go, Namo Guan Shin Pusa, Namo Guan Shin Pusa, Namo Guan Shin Pusa, and trying to develop a merit there, and to try to pass on to others the merit that you've developed in terms of that. I've been playing with this. This is not Orthodox Dharma drum Buddhist Chan approved method. I'm just letting you know what I do in terms of experimenting, of playing with contemplation. And as I begin Namo Guan Shin Pusa, then I begin to listen. And no longer am I going Namo Guan Shin Pusa. I am listening. I should say listening this way. And you hear it. Namo Guan Shin Pusa, Namo Guan Shin. Help me, Jesus. No, help me, Buddha. Help me, Jehovah, Muhammad, you name it. Help me. Help me. I need help. And you hear the prayers, even though you're doing this and you're moving the beads, the sound no longer comes from you. It no longer comes from any ideation of an ego. It is just simply that one realizes that they're a vehicle for change, a vehicle for help, a conduit of blessings. I don't know where this is going to end for me, but it's just been evolving in this way that, and I don't want people to say, oh, Gilbert thinks he's Guan Yin. No, I don't think that. What I think is that how best to make that connection, to fuse that way. And I'm going to tell you something else too. It works. It works. You try your best. I can't say it works 100%, but it works. And you, how could you not hear the suffering of the world? Not just the suffering that's happening in this moment in this world, but the suffering of what has happened since time immemorial, when sentient beings began to exist, and those that will come after you. How could you not listen to that? How could you not want to be part of a resolution of that own awakening? This is contemplation. It is beyond any kind of words or phrases to be able to do that. If you can feel even a 1/1,000th, 1,000th of what I'm talking about this last bit, that's contemplating. Okay. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully I answered the question about that. I was asked that question by quite a few people, plus one Buddhist monk that's a very sincere practitioner, very, very sincere, and he deserved a full-blown answer to it. So this is for you. Okay, I'll take questions. I think Ben's up first.
Hi, my question is.
Go ahead.
My question is, why did mind create the ego? If everything is a product of the mind, it seems like mind created the ego that has the illusion of being separate from the mind. So why did it do it in the first place?
This is a question that you ask that cannot be answered. It's like saying, when did everything begin, or when did those things happen, or when did mind begin? How can you answer that? The only thing we have been is the understanding of how it came into being, which is this uh, ignorance. And from the ignorance, then from the 12 nidanas, that first nidana is ignorance, then began to become formations of things and the five skandha. But it isn't something that, it wasn't like God that, let's say, I think the harder question for me is that if there is a God, why would he create a devil? And it's the difference between a monistic religion or a multi theistic religion and Buddhism, which is not a religion. It is an explanation of appearances, and it's something that mind. It was created in mind. There's a difference. All phenomena is created in mind, but there is not um, a supreme deity that said, you know what, I'm going to create a world. I'm going to mess with everybody and create an ego, because that's what we need. Because I have nothing to do for the rest of eternity, and I'm here lonely, and I want to create a world where people suffer. It isn't in this way, and to do it and trying to put it in the context of a religious approach doesn't work. It can't work that way. And if you study the sutras and the deep, profound meanings of it, you'll see that it is in this way. But we cannot say when, where was the meter that all of a sudden all this stuff came into play. Because we have no idea, for instance, Ben, where this world, this samsaric world, this little tiny mote of dust was created in relation to other appearances. We have no idea where that is. So it wasn't that, okay, I decide, I'm going to let there be light and let there be this and let there be, you know, um, pain in the butt. Things happen to people. It isn't in that way. It's not a divine plan. It is something that we see how it is, and that's why I'm a Buddhist, because I could not reconcile that with an idea of somebody, a supreme being, creating purposely or intentionally creating us. How that first bit of ignorance happened, I don't know. Nobody can say that. But it was not a divine plan. So that's important for you to know. If you understand that, that really helps you a lot in terms of understanding Buddhism, that it is not a religion, that we're not trying to reach a particular place. The only thing that we hope is to gain an awakening that this is a dream, and to awaken others to that. Okay. But it's a good question. I mean, these are legitimate questions to do. So don't feel, oh, I shouldn't have asked that question. You should. Any
I hope
questions like that? Huh?
I was up this time.
Okay, good. So yeah, I mean, these questions are important, they, and if I can't answer that question, you know, then I'm not doing my job, then switch to somebody else, But anyway, yeah, good question. Okay, Sam, you're going to ask me who created Ben?
Amitofo, Gilbert. Thank you for your lecture tonight. Thank you. I actually think Ben's question, it cracks me up because I think I've been coming to your lectures for, I think, around 2 years now. And way in the beginning, when I first started learning about the 12 links, I thought I hit the nail on the head. And I asked you, I was like, hey, Gilbert, why did mind create ignorance in the first place? And you were like, why would you ask that? You should just practice. You were like, don't waste your time. Get back to the practice. And it just made me laugh because it reminded me of, you come up with those questions and we wonder about these unanswerable or beginningless questions. And when, the purpose of this is to get to the practice. And things like that. So that was awesome. But what I wanted to ask you about was when you were talking about how you've been experimenting with direct contemplation. I found it really moving, and it really resonated. But my question is, in one of Bodhidharma's sermons, Bodhidharma talks about how when reciting like a Buddha's name or Guanyin Pusa's name, there is a difference between just reciting the name and invoking them. And I was wondering, it sounds like the way you're experimenting it's more so finding a way to invoke the compassion of Guanyin or invoke the power of Amitabha and things like that versus just reciting it for reciting its sake. And I was just wondering if you could speak on that a little bit.
Oh, it's a good question. When we first start out, we start practicing, and we're just in the Nyanfo. We're just reciting, uh, Nam Amitofu, Nam Amitofu, respect to the Amitabha, and we just reciting it, and then at the end we say, "I'll transfer merit to whoever." If you really get it, at least at that point you realize there was something that you were doing, and you find that there's something of value, some kind of a card that you can um, transfer the value for whatever it's worth. And as you begin to practice in this way, you find that there is um, more of an interest in invoking from the heart this connection between the Buddha or Kuan Yin or to whoever. And when you do that, you're then expressing um, a um, an interest in that and in making a closer connection. And then on the third level, which I'd call the esoteric level, is the realizations based on awakening that one begins to tap that power. And not in a way we're saying, oh, I want to be powerful, but tap the potentiality of the creations in the mind in a positive way and become not the one that is appealing, but the one that is allowing the attention and the compassion of the mind to flow to them. So this is where I'm at now. Where it goes, I don't know. But I kind of went through this progression, kind of what you were talking about as you begin to do that. So I wouldn't recommend you just try to do it the way I did it. I think it's something that you have to kind of get a feel for each way, but you can do that in your own ways and your own things. You don't have to copy me in that. You just have to kind of explore mind and explore the potentiality of mind and be aware in moment to moment and begin to look at what is arising in mind, why it's arising in mind. And if your mind is calm, it is able to carry out these calculations which appear to be impossible to do um, simultaneously and instantaneously. Eventually, it's instantaneous. For a while, it's simultaneous, and then there's a pause, and kind of like the old processing units, and then it spits out the stuff. We are using the old Tandy computers, from the 80s, you know, but mind is so far beyond that of its potentiality of being able to process information because the whole Alaya Vijnana, the total information network, is at hand at any given moment. We just have to know how to use it. To me, if you wanted me to help you and this was a computer, don't ask me because I'm still hunting and pecking. But some people they can process the information very quickly, and you just kind of experiment with that with your heart, not with I want to get this superpower. Yet that kind of way of doing things is very pitiable, and hunting to getting more and more powers is not good. What matters is the real sincerity of developing great compassion. That great compassion comes from a constant application of wisdom until wisdom is just a term, but mind being mind is a demonstration of that wisdom. Okay. So that's how you practice, but you're getting there. Is it 2 years? You're not doing too bad for right now. You're just almost out of junior college.
Hopefully, I'll get my associate with Dharma.
There you go.
Absolutely.
But remember, if you stay in junior college too long, they'll let you teach the classes.
Yeah, yeah. Probably at the community college, right? But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the community. I'm using the old terms of junior college, but it's community college these days.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right, Aeon?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? No, you guys are. All right. Here comes Nick.
Amitofu, Gilbert. I'm curious. I know from your lectures, I've only been here for this year, but you've used like present moment awareness, choose the Buddha, and direct contemplation. It seems like they're interchangeable. I'm curious if that's correct, if you could expand on that.
Yeah, I think these terms are as they go along. We have so many terms like that to try to, like facets of a diamond, turn it this way. Some people, they can gain entry through this facet, others that's not there. And then every once in a while you turn it and they can look into it and they can see it, which is good. Um, we use these and they all go back to just this mind is the Buddha mind, and then it gets reduced down further to just this, and then that's old Villamacritti talking. These are all the ideas of that. They all have some separate sense of information that they impart, but when we look at it, it is when we are using this non-discriminating, non-dwelling, non-differentiating mind, that becomes very clear. And again, that is what Ling Chi said is the Trikaya or of the Nirmanakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Dharmakaya, and they all are present in any given moment. We may not see that, but they're all present. And when we understand that, then we understand how things work. We understand that just this mind that we use is the Buddha mind. It's not very easy, when you're sitting there and going, woe is me about my problems or whatever, but everybody has problems. That's part of the samsara, at least in the human realm. But as we begin to expand this idea of samsara to incorporate the 6 realms, and this is just in this world. Who knows in other worlds what levels of samsaric realms there are. We should not think that we are the only entities in the universe. If we had astronomers here or whatever, they would be able to tell you, that probabilities are very high that there's more than one planet that's capable of sustaining life, and that's just simply in this cosmos. So it's interesting, but we begin to practice in this way, understanding these, and again, reverse engineering to the point where we see it is the ignorance that where everything started, and that essentially is Queen Sharmala Devi's Lion's Roar Sutra, which looks at it and sees that all of these things are are arising out of this Nissan entrenchment, this ignorance, but everything has a Buddha nature. And that's what's important, is when we begin to understand, rather than to see things as an exclusion, we see things from the viewpoint of an inclusion, and it changes things tremendously. So hopefully that will help you. But all of these things, they begin to do this. It is you that's beginning to connect the links that put that together as you begin to see it. That is connected from the heart, not from cogitation. Okay? Follow up? Nope. All right. We'll turn to Tori.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. That was very inspiring. Of this practice, that new practice that you're experimenting, because it's like in my own practice, I barely was able to, but like during the process of contemplating, just like that, subjectively, listening to the ego's voice, and also my surrounding, and just everything, just there's not the differentiation, just everything is equal, whether it's my own ego yapping away or just noise in my own surrounding, right? And it's still that I'm able to just but listen to my own voice, but to be able to listen to people who need help, that be able to practice that compassion. I just find that is so inspiring. Yes, my own job, I'm listening with my physical ears of people's problems, but I think it's like, can I not be so wrap up in my own egoic thoughts and just opinions, or how I see things, but be able to listening to other voices that need help. I hope I make sense. I thought that's just so inspiring. Thank you.
Yeah, listening to you, I don't even know what to say. It's just something that comes to me in the middle of the night after I finish all of my recitation. My mind is very quiet, so the last parts that I do, they just come naturally. And I've just been experimenting with that, of letting go and listening. And one of the things that I talk about that's very important for us in this life is to listen. So we listen. If we listen, we understand, let's say, the needs and the problems of pets. Like if you have a very close pet, you may not be, they're not speaking to you, but you certainly know if they're feeling well or not feeling well. And if you see things and you understand their nature, it is something that you are clear about, that this is the way it is. Sometimes the nature of some beings, we come into contact with, and we judge them bad. Like when we see, in my neighborhood, we have a whole bunch of coyotes that have a very good appetite for little dogs, and everybody is so upset about the coyotes who were there before any of the people that came here and got it. I'm not saying that I don't feel for the little dogs, but I don't hate coyotes, and I understand that we coexist. But again, that you can say the same thing about many different people, and people who are contrary to you, and they want to take a position, a combative position, kind of like a Asherlo, a demagogue or Ashera, and you understand that, but you understand how to peacefully coexist with these entities, whether they're from this world or from a different realm, and you see the things in it all by listening. And this listening is what was such a key to me when I saw what the name was in the Abhidharma, that the one that listens to the suffering of the world. And so you understand that this is a karuna. Guanyin Pusa is Maha Karuna, has the ability to listen to all of the suffering. And we see that in the Bodhisattva Guanyin is only one that has that kind of an interest to see the suffering, such as Disampusa is there, and Samantabhadra, whose practice is one of demonstrating the Buddha gnosis. And I think that that's important when we begin to understand this, because we take the Buddhism to another level. We separate it from simply devotional. And let me be clear, I'm very devotional. I burn incense every day, offer fruit, to the Buddhas. I have a Buddha altar. And but in my practice, in my processing of recitation, it is beginning to take on new levels, and being able to do it. And it's something that when you begin to transfer merit to others because they're in need of it, you include the whole class of people that are in the similar one. If somebody has a problem with cancer, then you give it to them, but then you give it back to all of the people that are doing that, to all of the families that are affected by the cancer, and all of those things. And it's just an amazing practice. And why can't we do that? The only reason we couldn't is because maybe at night we're too sleepy, or maybe at night, or maybe we don't have faith in our practice. But the faith is very, very important in the practice. When we have a strong faith, everything opens up and enables us to break down the discriminations and differentiations of the ego, to allow us to clearly see. And we see and feel, not from the senses, not from the consciousness, but from the heart. And that's hard to explain, because you say, well, how can the heart feel? The heart is just a representation of something that's beyond a thinking or a processing mind, that there's another aspect to it. That heart is the Buddha. And when we begin to tap into that, then the possibilities of helping people and the ability to be able to perceive suffering is incredible. We don't pat ourselves on the back. We don't do anything like that, or say, oh, I'm a great bodhisattva, or I'm going to be one, or whatever. It isn't in that way. It's just a product of sincere practice. So you will see. I always told you have a lot of potential. There's a lot of you here that have great potential. And so I know that you will be one. That's why I take a few of you under my wing. So okay. Any other questions? No? What time? Let me see. Santa, you had a question for Sue.
Oh, yes. On the e-deal, wanted to register for the retreat. So, Sue there.
You don't have a connection? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was not able to unmute. So who wants to register?
Can you put your
e-deal,
picture on?
I think I'll ask her to unmute as well. So let me. Okay to stop the recording, Gilbert?
Yeah, please. Yeah.